Samuel Stevens, a young black man, didn't seem to belong in Dr. Richard Sterling's classroom. Sterling, a professor at Harrington University, Boston's premier mathematics program, thought it was absurd that Samuel, whose father cleaned toilets in the very building, had earned a place in this elite institution. In front of a class of 200 students, Dr. Sterling crumpled Samuel's paper and threw it right at his face. The students watched as he picked it up, tore it in half, and dropped both pieces to the floor. Sterling didn't think Samuel would be able to offer anything valuable, let alone solve a complex equation that even his PhD students couldn't crack. Just 3 months ago, Samuel had transferred from a community college. His father worked nights as a janitor at Harrington, cleaning the very halls that Samuel walked through during the day. Dr. Sterling turned to the problem on the board, a seemingly impossible equation that had stumped his best students for months. My PhD student, Ethan Caldwell from Yale, worked on this for 3 months and failed, Sterling boasted. Even he couldn't solve this. What makes you think you can? With a cold, mocking smile, he taunted Samuel. You think you found the mistake? Samuel stood tall and steady. May I show you, Professor? He asked calmly. Sterling smirked. Let's see you fail. But Samuel didn't move yet. First, he wanted everyone to understand how he even got into this room. 6 weeks earlier, Samuel had walked through the gates of Harrington as a full scholarship student. After 2 years at a community college where he worked 40-hour weeks to maintain a perfect academic record, he had earned his place. His acceptance was a token of his brilliance, but it came with a heavy dose of skepticism from the mathematics department, who didn't exactly welcome his presence. Dr. Richard Sterling, the department chair, was a well-respected figure, having trained many students who now held prestigious academic positions. But his methods were harsh. He believed pressure tested a student's true abilities. He created an environment where only the best thrived. If you succeeded under his intense scrutiny, you were guaranteed opportunities at top universities. If you failed, you were done. Samuel was one of only 3 black students in the entire mathematics program at Harrington. The others warned him during orientation. Sterling tests you differently. He'll question everything you do. Just survive. But Samuel wasn't just surviving, he was excelling. His father, James, worked as a janitor at Harrington, mopping floors every night. Samuel never had the privilege of structured academic resources, but he worked tirelessly, studying during lunch breaks, on bus rides, and even while mopping floors late at night. He had filled 12 notebooks with original proofs over 3 years. Sterling had made up his mind about Samuel from the start, treating him with disdain. Samuel's homework was repeatedly accused of plagiarism. When he correctly answered questions in class, he was ignored. Meanwhile, Sterling showered praise on Ethan Caldwell, a Yale graduate from a prestigious background. Samuel represented everything Sterling feared, a challenge to his narrow definition of talent. 3 weeks into the semester, Sterling introduced a modified Goldbach problem, an equation Samuel would later identify as flawed. But before that, it had become a legend at Harrington, an unsolved problem that had humiliated many advanced mathematicians. Ethan Caldwell spent an entire semester working on it, but like the others, he failed. One night, while Samuel was working his janitorial shift, he passed by the whiteboard in Sterling's office. The equation, the so-called impossible problem, was still visible. He stopped, stared, and saw something others had missed. The problem was logically impossible. It was as if it were asking for a square circle. Samuel realized that the constraints Sterling had added made the problem unsolvable. He photographed the equation and spent the next few days working on it. 2 days later, Samuel proved the impossibility of the equation. 3 days after that, he corrected Sterling's formulation and solved the revised problem. When he submitted his work to Sterling, he expected recognition for his insight. Instead, Sterling humiliated him in front of the class, throwing the solution in his face. Now, standing with the torn paper at his feet, Samuel faced a choice: accept the humiliation in silence, or walk to the board and prove his worth. As the room held its breath, Sterling's smile was predatory. Samuel picked up the torn paper, smoothed it out, and walked toward the board. Sterling stood blocking half of it, still in his position of power. Before Samuel could begin, Sterling turned to the class explaining the importance of the problem. He highlighted how it had been presented at conferences and reviewed by published mathematicians. He even mentioned that Ethan Caldwell had spent months on it, but had failed. Then he questioned Samuel's confidence. "You've only been here 6 weeks, you work night shifts, and you transferred from community college. What makes you think you found what everyone else missed?" Samuel's voice remained steady. "May I show my work, Professor?" he asked. "By all means," Sterling replied, stepping aside with exaggerated politeness. Samuel didn't begin with his solution. Instead, he copied Sterling's exact problem onto the board, with every symbol and every constraint. He underlined the logical flaw in the equation, showing how the problem could not possibly exist. It was like asking for an even number that was also prime, excluding 2. As he worked, the room fell silent. Samuel didn't just offer an interpretation of the problem. He presented proof. "That's why Ethan couldn't solve it. Nobody could. You've been presenting an impossible problem for 5 years," Samuel said. A gasp echoed from the students. Phones appeared, recording the moment. Then, from the back of the room, a voice interrupted. Professor Catherine Moore, a visiting scholar from MIT, stood up and confirmed what Samuel had said. "I noticed this last week, but I assumed it was part of the problem's complexity. It's a logical impossibility." Sterling's authority began to crumble in real time. Professor Moore explained that Samuel had corrected Sterling's mistake, solved the problem, and then solved the corrected version using an innovative mathematical approach. Sterling, now cornered, tried to save face by accusing Samuel of relying on an obscure Soviet paper. He attempted to discredit Samuel's work, but Moore countered, stating that the work was original. The battle between them exposed the flaws in Sterling's methods and biases. With Moore's backing, Samuel stood his ground and proved that his approach, a mixture of visual thinking and geometric intuition, was just as valid, if not more effective, than traditional methods. The room watched in stunned silence as Samuel presented his work with clarity, slowly unraveling the equations and disproving the idea that his approach lacked rigor. "You said my proofs lack rigor," Samuel said quietly to Sterling. "This uses standard graduate tools. The only difference is I drew pictures first to see the structure." Sterling stood speechless. His bias had been exposed for all to see, and while Samuel had been dismissed as the janitor's kid, he had just dismantled everything that had been thrown at him. The rest of the semester would be a test for Samuel as he prepared for the final round of the Harrington Challenge. The competition was fierce, but Samuel had proven that his unique methods had the potential to change the game. As the rounds progressed, the tension grew. And when the final judgment came, Samuel wasn't just competing, he was dominating. His work was nothing short of extraordinary, and he had shown that perseverance, confidence, and a unique approach were the keys to his success. The message was clear. You don't need permission to show the world what you're capable of. Samuel Stevens had made his mark, not by following the rules, but by breaking them and proving, once and for all, that true brilliance can't be contained by societal expectations.